So the old Fort House Museum in Fort Edward. It's about a half a mile from the entrance of what would have been the Fort of Fort Edward, right up the road, uh, just north of here. It was built in 1772 with wood from the old fort itself. The museum has served as a boarding house, a single family dwelling, several times between 1770 and 1940. The museum opened to the public in 1953. In our modern time, it consisted of 5 building complex with area artifacts. The house's most known citizen is Solomon Northrop, author of the 12 Years a Slave, recently made into a historic building about his life and about him being a free man and taken into slavery for about 12 years. He married on the property in 1828 and lived there during the first years of his marriage to Hampton. This free black man was born in New York State, upstate New York, and was drugged into and sold into slavery in 1840. He spent 12 years, as I was just saying, as a slave in Louisiana before becoming set free. And it should be noted, after returning home, Northrop vanished again, attempting to free himself from certain capture a second time, sometime later dying, and his body was never found, which regional historians, including myself, have spent decades trying to find his last whereabouts. I've actually spent about 10 years of my personal time researching him and researching his family and researching his last whereabouts, and have came up unhanded as far as where he would have possibly died. There is some inclination it was north of here, up near Plattsburgh, though. We're looking into it, though. The old Fort House obviously served as Solomon's North Out where he published in 1853 the 12 Years a Slave, originally published the 12 Years a Slave book, and was later adopted into movie, as we were just discussing, with David Fisk, Crawford W. Brown Jr., and Rachel Sillingham. They put out their book, and they write, Northrop had dropped from public notice in the fall of 1857. John Henry speculated that Northrop had been abducted a second time or murdered. On the premises is located a waterworks building, which serves as several purposes as a well, lockup from a village jail, and a replica store, tools displayed within the museum as well, and a Delaware Hudson Railroad handcar, as you can see in its fashion. The Conkhite Pavilion, the oldest serving building from the Washington County Fair. The doctor's garden, as well too, which is on the premises behind the building. You actually have to pay unfortunately, you have to pay now to enter the museum, which is inside that 1772 house that we're looking at right now. I'm on the property. Unfortunately, I didn't obtain a note for that today, but that's okay. Patrick Smith one time stayed here too, but only resided in the house for a few years, which later he became imprisoned in 1777 by General Benedict Arnold for being a supporter for the British cause. And as we noticed, some years later, Arnold himself would join the British cause himself and become famous for him being the Revolutionary War's greatest known betrayer of the American cause. But as we've talked about before with these guys, not only with Arnold, but some of these other guys along the way that we've been talking about, these guys felt that they had a reason to vacate their post and go to be with who they believed they needed to be with. And at that time, war was war, and these men felt that they needed to change sides. And today we call them traitors, but were they really traitors? Were they just men trying to do a job and felt that they needed to do something different? Well, I believe that, you know. General John Stark also stayed here for a period of time, and apparently it was named Fort Stark during that period of time under British General John Burgoyne's um, when he got here at that time, late 1777. In addition, residents included Dr. John uh, Corhan, Cochran, George Washington's personal surgeon. George Washington himself dined here twice in July of 1783 on his way to Crown Point North, headed to survey the not only Crown Point but Fort Edward and Lake George battlefields after the Revolutionary War was over. In 1949, around the Second World War time period, the house was purchased by 12 Fort Edward businessmen, which the area using for it was a benefit for the community. Today, the Old Fort House Museum celebrates 60th anniversary as a museum. It is open to the public for tours, offers historical education programs for local schools. The property is now a home of several other historic buildings, as we just were talking about, which the Fort Edward Association has interconnections with that as well too, especially like with artifacts and stuff like that. Moving on. Also open to the public, Crandall Falls Monroe Plank Roll Toll House, which was constructed in 1840 as a southern entrance to the Plank Road, carried travelers from Monroe Station to South Glens Falls, about 4 or 5 miles north of here. The property also includes a Riverside Schoolhouse, built at the turn of the 20th century along with the banks of the Hudson River in Northumberland, New York, as a Greek Revival style. And Dallas Witt Law Office was built in 1853 and is furnished with a period that bolsters the style of the late 18th century. The Pat Smith or Patrick Smith House, which was also known as the Old Fort House Museum, during Burgoyne's time, 1777, Madame Roiselle, in August of 1777, wrote regarding the house and what would later become the museum. We passed very happily the 3 weeks together. The country around was very beautiful and were the mindset of the encampment of the British and German troops. We had for lodging a dwelling called the Red House. It consisted of one room for my husband and myself and our children, a study for my husband, and an entrance hall which my female servants slept. Well, when the weather was fine, we dined underneath the trees, and if not, in the barn. Here planks were laid upon cast to serve on the table. So they laid planks across the table, and that was their table for the time period. Moving on. Sorry about the paper exchange here.